All right, so this is vlog 18. It'll be somewhat quick. I always say that, but then it's like a little longer. But this one will actually be quick. I just have some updates. Haven't been feeling that well, but and I did like a vlog earlier this week, but I decided I'll just continue my tradition of doing it on Saturday and or Sunday. I just chose Saturday because I'm up and well, here I am. Yeah, again, sleep not great. I keep falling asleep during the middle of the day a lot. That some of that is on me because I'm just so. I feel like I'm having trouble pacing and getting back into that rhythm of doing it. Because it like when you're pacing, you just feel like you're dead, like you exist, and you don't. You're micromanaging your life, and that gave me a tremendous amount of anxiety. It's also like extremely traumatic. I know that word is thrown around a lot, traumatic, but it is very traumatic to have to manage this illness because it's like managing like a car wreck, or whatever, an accident every single day. And I'm so imagine that, right? And having to deal with that like emotionally and psychologically and physiologically, etc. Anyways, and then like just the repercussions of it, knowing that you have to do it again the next day, right? It's just like the worst shit in the world. So and then I had like a rash on my arm this week that sucked because of the heat. The weather has been very uncooperative. I don't do well with humidity with this illness. It just causes a lot of swelling and I think it's particularly swelling in the back of my neck and stuff like that. And maybe um, perhaps has something to do with like intracranial pressure. I don't know if it interacts with that at all. I feel like it does. Um, yeah, but so anyways, we'll just get into it. Um, so this is vlog 18. I want to talk about the MECFS gets screwed again, and then also briefly about dating with chronic illness. So very briefly about the MECFS gets screwed again. Dr. Avindran, or as I'm saying this, Avindra Nath, who's the head of the neurological disorders and strokes at the National Institute of Health, came out with this very peculiar quote a few days ago, where he said the population affected by long COVID is so much larger and symptoms are so much more severe compared to MECFS that we decided that what we should do is focus on long COVID. Now, I don't know where he got that part from. I'm assuming, yes, there are probably now at this point more people who have exhibited um, long COVID symptoms and have gravitated into long COVID syndrome, right? Just based on the fact that more people have had COVID in this country, right? Than not. Um, but to say that the disease is more severe, I don't know how he came up with that figure. It doesn't seem to be based on anything. It doesn't seem to be taking into consideration that um, most people who have MECFS can't even work. I mean, the overwhelming majority of people can't work. There's 25% of the people who are on the severe to very severe scale, meaning that like they're bedbound. So, and then the rest of them are either housebound or semi housebound. So I don't know where he gets this. The quality of life scores are below people who have end stage renal failure and cancer. So like, um, my assumption is two things. Now, one of them is probably less so, but one of them seems to be more likely. One is that they understand that long COVID presents a existential threat to the entire um, labor supply, right? Um, the From my worldview of how I understand economics, this would be a disaster for capitalism, right? Because we're assuming, from again my perspective, that labor is the source of capital's profits, right? Whether it happens in the form of rent or industrial profits or whatever, it doesn't matter, or interest payments, right? So this is a calamitous disaster for the mode of production. And they know it, right? Labor participation rates have been falling for 24 years, right? They peak in the 80s and they've steadily declined since the 2000s. Having said that, that is my initial gut reaction to it, is that they are trying to mitigate that. And so, I mean, that could have positive effects downstream for MECFS. It seems unlikely. Because even though they're not quite the same illness, some of long COVID does become MECFS, obviously, is that it also typifies what I was saying in a previous vlog, is that the state has a scarcity mindset, and that only makes sense because we live under a sort of marginal utility sort of school of thought where that's the mindset. Is like their goods are scarce on some level, and or resources are scarce, or whether that's in the form of material stuff or monetary resources, and therefore they have to be allocated properly on some level. Of course, this is bullshit. Of course, there's not. It's not like there's, there's like 22 Stop and Shops just stopped operating in my state because not because there's not enough food, not because there's not enough space, not because there's not enough demand for food, right? There's plenty of people who are hungry and want to eat every day, obviously, to survive. It's because it's unprofitable for them to exist, right? And so there's a similar logic when you apply it to the state. They work through that lens of, well, we only have a certain amount of income coming in, right? How do we turn this not necessarily profitable, because the government doesn't make anything per se, but we can only allocate what we are given through Congress and what we're given through, again, however they collect source funding for the NIH and all these various health organizations. So that's the limitations that they're working through on and with. And the second one is more of a, probably in the realm of conspiracy, but it does have some precedence to it, which is the fact that the longer that they delay focusing on like actual treatment modalities, and they just sort of say things like, oh, well, yeah, sure, we're working on long COVID or something like that. We're definitely focusing on it. But if they don't have to, they probably don't actually have to show any results, like per se. Then they can sort of, since they know that there's this incoming barrage, this avalanche of people who are going to be disabled soon, and they can project this out into the future, like relatively with some relative accuracy now, because we're 4 years into it. They can start saying, okay, this is how fast disability rolls are going to start climbing. If I showed you, I did a blog on this about COVID and the government and disability rolls and stuff like that. And the line is just from 2020, it just does this. It just goes straight, like up. Right? And people would be like, well, it could be anything. I was like, right, but there was a fucking pandemic. And we know the cause of why most people are getting disabilities, right? This is skewing from the average, like by a lot. The historical averages are showing the relative increment in relation to population growth, which makes perfect sense, right? But then once 2020 and 2021 hit, the disability just goes through the roof, and it's going to continue to do that. And that's not even including the people who are not even applying yet, right? That includes the people who refuse to even believe they have long COVID or some other illness. The people who are just pushing through it right now because they don't know any better, right? For whatever political or ideological or denial reasons. Like I saw a lady yesterday on Twitter, and she was saying like, after 8 months, I just have to I'm reconciling the fact that I have long COVID and I'm disabled and I have to stop working, right? And I see this a lot now, and by a lot I mean for the frequency in which each people are willing to admit this relative to how they were a couple of years ago. So that sucks that MECFS is getting screwed, and then I read another. I just read a short article that came out in the UK, and then featured Ron Davis, and it featured, the title was something like, "We're going to find a cure for MECFS," and like, that's nice. Like, what is like, they've been saying that for 40 years. And it's like, that's nice. It's like, that's fine. That's great. I was like, I'm happy. I was like, and they're basing it off this like model of like this person who stopped having PEM for like a year. It was one of Ron Davis's like research assistants or something like that, and she got better, like completely better. But like, there's no evidence that this is like the case, like that. Sure, I mean, I'm sure it reduces inflammation everywhere, and it helps like maybe have some sort of establish some sort of what you would call like recovery baseline, but it doesn't seem like this is universal. Like, you would have to then explain like why other people recover for entirely different reasons. For example, like, we don't know the mechanisms behind it. We don't even know the mechanisms driving this illness. So like, it's just bad news everywhere. And I'm not trying to be pessimistic. I mean, I did read some quasi optimistic news on MECFS research, but like, it's still like very scant, and it's very weak and suppositional. So it doesn't even like rise to the degree of, if it weren't so humid, I wouldn't have to keep fucking like touching my hair, because like my hair is just like gravitating outward like this. It's like expanding like the universe because of the humidity. It's just in constant acceleration outwards. I'm fucking sick and tired of it. I need a haircut. I haven't had a haircut like at a barber in like 5 years because of the pandemic, and then getting sick, and then just not wanting to get sick because like I want my hair to look good. So I cut my own hair with my own. Do I have my clippers on me? No, they're over there. But like, I have my own clippers. I just do it myself, and it looks relatively fine. And then the last part I wanted to talk about was dating with chronic illness. Very briefly, it's just a gripe, really. Like, I have a lot of gripes because people, like, when you're chronically ill, like, there's not much to do besides like gripe about the shit you can't do and how hard things are sometimes. Even if you've adjusted to it, like, it's not quite like, people are like, well, you should be grateful for the things that you have. And it's just like, okay, well, suck a dick. I don't know what to tell you. Anyways, dating, I haven't been on a date in a very long time. And I know there's a lot of people who are like, is dating possible with chronic illness? And the answer is kind of, if you are, there's a lot of factors into it. One, first of all, obviously all chronic illnesses are not the same. Like, I remember I watched I don't know if it was like a Nightline or 60 Minutes thing, or like something on PBS, and it was like this woman who had like terminal cancer, and she was getting married because she wanted to get married, right? And she had a husband who wanted, and so like, it exists. I mean, it exists on a very, in her case, her illness wasn't chronic; it was terminal. But it's, and this will again sound a lot more. There's no data for any of this, by the way. There's very little data, or if there is, there's very little data, especially at the subsection of MECFS patients in the chronically ill community, right? If you have an illness like some sort of autoimmune condition, like, I have plenty of friends who have like autoimmune conditions that are not MECFS, who are in relationships, for example, right? Some of them have Crohn's disease. Some of them have different forms of MCAS, or some of them have thyroid issues, or so they're like either hypo or hyperthyroidism. Some of them have EDS, etc. And so like a broad spectrum of autoimmune conditions, and they're still up to date because those things are not as delimiting as MECFS, right? And it's not like if they get like a cold or like the flu, there's a chance that like they're just going to go, their disease is just going to go haywire, and then the decline is not like so drastic. They're more than likely going to get like well from it for the most part, right? And like whatever their baseline was, they'll return to it. Whereas like it's a lot iffier for people with like ME. So, and also, yeah, it is entirely, not entirely. I don't want, because again, we don't have numbers on it. My assumption, we'll call it, and it could be flawed. It could be, I recognize that it could be flawed. My assumption is that it's easier for women with chronic illness to date. It's not easier with chronic illness for women who are already in relationships once they receive a chronic illness, because it's more likely that the male will leave. That we have numbers on. That we have figures on already, right? That's been demonstrated, is that it's more likely that the man or in the relationship will leave because, well, I don't know, they just, whatever, they're not getting their needs met, or they're just not good caretakers, etc. Right? So those figures we have. We do not have figures for whether or not it's easier for men or women to enter with chronic illnesses to enter a relationship, either with someone else who's chronically ill, or in this case, I'm talking about people who are not chronically ill. And the reason why is obvious, is because we live under a capitalist society. We still live under a quasi-patriarchal order where there's still a modicum of expectation that the male be the provider, even though that's entirely unrealistic at this point, considering the fact that the majority of women go to college over men, right? Over lifetime earnings, men will still earn more, but that's because you're factoring in still like low wage jobs that women take. But when you get to the upper echelons of like beyond like $60,000-$70,000, it's pretty much even for the most part, right? And so women, like I know plenty of women who were way more successful than I ever was in work, but that's also because I didn't give a shit. Like I hate wage labor, I hate work, I hate corporate structure, I hate corporate ladder and climbing, hate all of it, right? So I could never be a provider in that sense, right? I could be a good emotional provider. I've always been told I was good at that. But in terms of like the actual like providing, it's funny because like women are always, in some level, and again, this sounds like some sort of like I'm doing some Andrew Dice Clay stand-up bit or something like that. It's like, oh, what's with women, But no, it's there is some part of women who are still like have some expectation that like the man is going to like bring in some sort of like form of income and be able to provide for them and do all these other things. And it's just like, I was like, no. I was like, it's not 1949. Most men can't change a fucking tire. Never mind they're going to be the breadwinners. They're more likely going to be the bread losers. So that is a hurdle that is very difficult to clear, I think, in terms of dating. I think it's very difficult in terms of finding someone understanding who also too, because as a man too, like women in the able-bodied community are already on some level, and I understand this, that they're already, because men are on some level at this point in history. I'm not saying they were always like this. Maybe they were. I don't know. I wasn't alive then, but there are already a lot of like man children in the world, right? So like women are already their caretakers on some level, and they're probably tired of doing it, and they want someone who's a little bit more self-sufficient, let's call it, right? But when you have chronic illness, you can't help it. It's not like I'm not self-sufficient because I don't want to be. It's not self-sufficient because I can't, right? So that's something that they'd have to. But that, again, that's their prerogative and choice. So like so the dating, what they call the dating pool, really becomes a dating puddle. Right? That's what it basically becomes when you have chronic illness, and it's even smaller than that when you get to the level of people who are actually understanding of it and you can be compatible with and are willing to put up with it and understand what they're getting into. So like when, for example, like, and I don't mean this to be crass or whatever, but like, or insensitive rather, but when I read that story about the guy getting married to like the woman who had terminal cancer, like everyone was like, "Oh, he's so brave." I was like, but in reality, he only had to put up with it for 6 months. It wasn't like he was going to be this person's caretaker for life. He's like till death to his part, and he was like, right, yeah, that part I'm fully on board with. Right, I mean, and I'm not trying to be insensitive to this person's situation who is now long since passed, or that this man lost his wife only 6 months later. He knew what he was getting into. So like, but he also knew in the back of his mind that I was like, oh, I don't want to put up with this for fucking her, for 40 years. But if you're especially if you're a young person, right, who has this illness, right, and if you're not already in a relationship, getting into it and trying to have to explain what this fucking illness is and what it could be, right? A lot more difficult. It's a lot more difficult for people to deal with this person's already sick, right? Right? Most people who are starting relationships are starting on the equal footing of like, okay, well, maybe one's a little more, a little less healthier than, but it's pretty even, right? In this situation, it would be, I am so unhealthy that I don't know what tomorrow is going to look like. I don't know what 40, I don't know if I have 30, 44, 30 or 40 more years, period. Right. And if I do, they're going to suck. We're not going to be able to travel. We're not going to be able to do this or that. We're not going to be able to go to I'm not going to be able to do the activities. Right. I'm going to be basically a house cat that you come home to on some level. Right. Yes, I can do some things and say I'll have to manage my differently for certain things. But so I find it very difficult, and I find it kind of unfair on some level because the disease itself is already very lonely, obviously, and it's very isolated, and it does not bear, bode well in terms of future health outcomes, because it's already been demonstrated that, for example, not being in a relationship shortens your lifespan, right? Loneliness is just as bad, if not worse, for you internally than smoking. It has more of a deleterious effect on it. Now, I don't know if it has more oncogenetic genic effects, meaning it's more makes your body more prone to cancer than smoking and inhaling actual carcinogenics. But like it's not good for you, right? And so it sucks. It fucking sucks because part of me would like to be in a relationship, but also part of me thinks I don't know if I think I might get worse if I was in a relationship, because then I would have all my energy would have to go in. So it's like you're fucked if you do, you're fucked if you don't. And so like, and by that I mean like you're fucked in the sense that like the entry barrier to as a chronically ill person is already shitty. But even if you do get into that, cross the barrier, and you find someone, now all your energy is just like your energy for yourself is like this, and then your energy has to be expended like more greatly for someone else, right? And then if you don't, then it's like, well, it's still bad for your health and it's bad for your mental well-being, and it's like it makes you very bitter. And there's only so many ways I can entertain myself. I will literally sit here sometimes and just laugh at weird things that come to my head. I forget what I was laughing about earlier today, or maybe it was early this morning. I forgot, like very early in the morning. But I had a very good laugh about something, and I was thinking to myself, "Oh, I've gone insane. That's what it is." I was like, This isn't funny. I've gone mentally, clinically fucking insane because I've been sheltered." Like a fucking POW, prisoner of war, for the last 2.5 years in this fucking dungeon, this fucking cavernous, fucking four-walled labyrinth, padded cell. That's what's happened. So it's fucking sucks. I don't know, but anyways, I still have sense of humor about it. That's good. I mean, mean, that's good, but I think that's just madness. I think that's just mania at this point. So anyways, that's the end of this fucking vlog. I have nothing more to say, and I will see you next week. And don't forget to like and subscribe. And I don't give a shit. I don't care about any of that stuff. Social media is stupid. I'll talk to you later.